So my barnacles or stones or whatever these are going to end up being are curing up. I've probably put $120 worth of foam on those. 3 $40 kits, 2 cans per kit. We're going to do the math at some point here. I've been saving all the cans. Obviously I have the receipts, but I've been saving all the cans just to take a photograph when I'm done with that stuff. I mean, paper's cheap. The aspenite that I ripped up to make those slips is cheap. Stuff that we built for other shows in the past is cheap. But spray glue and spray foam and foam board and caster wheels and new lumber is not cheap. So we'll see how we did on this one. But I think every scene is primarily pieces from other shows or things that we already had. And I'm pretty happy with that, but it's going to be remarkable how much we still managed to spend on this one. So it stinks in here. I got Gorilla Glue spray glue because they were out of 3M, and it works just as well, but I hate the solvent that they use in it. I need to remember that. That's why I don't like it. So in a pinch, I mean, none of them I shouldn't be breathing any of it, and neither should you. And the urethane is insidious because it doesn't stink that much, but you can definitely tell, and I'm getting a headache. There's a little smell, but it's really not good, and I got to get out of here as a result of that. Somewhere here, one of these balloons already popped, and I couldn't believe the foam went nowhere. I don't know what it is. I had it in my head that, and those are really robust, and those have been around for weeks, so I guess it's just, they'll take quite a bit, especially with a coat of heavy paint on them. So I'm looking forward to getting inside of the Ursula's lair and creating a doorway opening in here that she could fit through. And, the problem is just going to be that the face of this thing's going to go around and just stop. So I'm going to have to fade to black, try to fade. Everything's going to be painted black first. But I guess just dry brush over to that and, make it black, paint it black inside and hope that it looks normal. If we tried to backlight her inside, you'll see the edges of it. I don't know. We'll have to see. I did what I could on that, so hopefully it plays out well. Yeah, gotta go relax. It's that time of year again when old Uncle Chezzy's fingertips are covered with spray glue. You would think it would make more sense to wear gloves, but actually it's practically impossible because the gloves have no hand oils, etc., and the spray glue sticks fast to them, and they start like all you can do, your fingers are all stuck together and the glove stuck to itself and then it's torn, and so honestly you're just not going to be able to do it. I suppose maybe you could lube up your gloves. If I had everything just so, if I could run this place and organize projects like these and had a place to spread out and leave construction to happen, like over there, and then you'd wheel what you had for a set piece in for rehearsals and stuff, and then it would go back over to the set shop, get set up, in its own area again with all the peripheral things. This project is collaterally far less than it could be for all of the logistical factors, where there's only so much time to really get down to working on it in a messy way like this over weekends, and then cleaning it all back up again, and the trapdoor being clean, and not being able to stink the place up when people are working, and it really complicates matters here. It's a massively difficult project in that way, but I feel that I'm forged in that fire now, and it doesn't hurt to have the ability to do that, but boy, do I daydream about setting it up the way that would work best for me, and would be objectively the most cost-effective way to maximize what you can do. Not to mention having people familiarize themselves with the methods that we use and the standards that I go by with the way that I build, and then you can kind of step back from it. So anyway, I love doing almost all of it that I get to do, and it's a lot of fun, and I'm still having fun. But I'm just really noticing all the time that there are major pros and major cons to this. And it's, we have a remarkable space and a remarkable group of people here. And honestly, that's the most important thing, because if you didn't have that, forget it. We actually have a lot of utility, lots of overhead room, lots of wing space. We can even go out in the hall with things. The art room's right there. The band and orchestra rooms are here. The choral room are there, all of them large spaces. We got the basement storage right here, plenty of light and power, and it's comfortable working temperature. I protect the floor to a certain extent, but it doesn't matter much that we get crap all over it in here. And so at the end of the day, we really have really good, and I shouldn't be complaining at all. So I'm going to stop and I'm going to come back. I think I'm going to get that thing coated with black paint tomorrow, the way that we started with these trees, and then just a little dry brush on the texture will make it jump out. Although I'd like to do more than just that. So, I have several days after tomorrow to, get down to what I am going to do with the dry brushing on this thing. Not to mention I've got openings to cut in and shelves to build in and the sole jars to put in to this thing. And we've got to get fabric I'm going to throw up and over this area to kind of break up. It's neat to be able to do the stone, but a lot like the brick chimney for Ms. Honey's house last year, we made a cool brick chimney, and then a lot of people were surprised that I covered it up in a lot of ways with torn paper stuff and hanging pictures and stuff. It's the layers. It's in the layering. So the stone is cool, and it'll get you pretty far, and it wouldn't hurt if this was mostly stone with stuff in it, but I think a big sailcloth with lots of folds in it dragged down into this area here behind everything, as well as the same thing happening over here. Not the same, but the same piece of fabric coming down and complementing and coming in behind the shell here. And then I think I need some corals on either side of Triton's throne and stuff, And we're going to use this fabric that we made, the sail that we're flying in for the ship. It's a nice, big, heavy canvas. And after I get everything painted black, I'll throw it up and over, because the fact is that tone will look nice and off-white, but it can just hang out there. And then as I dry brush around it and I don't come close to it, all the perfect black behind it that's coming out of it will create even deeper, darker shadows behind it and add dimension to all of that. So I'm looking forward to it. And then, then you won't even see the construction that's incomplete there. The shell can be thrown together. That's something that the art teacher that did scenic work on shows when I was in school here made. It's in 2 pieces. And he's coming to see the show. He's often playing drum kit in the pit, believe it or not. But this year he didn't have yet too many obligations. But he's going to see the show, and hopefully he sees that, and I hope he enjoys it. And it's a little homage. We've got a lot of fun stuff. Again, I'm using a bunch of stuff that I built from previous shows, but we've even got stuff out here that is from shows long before my time. So that's cool, huh? So I'm rambling, and I'm going to come back tomorrow and keep working. So I forgot to mention a few things that I should have, but like back during Shrek, when I created this coped edge of Luan to come into the same curve on all these tree pieces, I've got the same ratio of outer diameter at the bottom to the actual diameter of the trunk. That's the same ratio, it's the same curve, which I'm so happy that I did, because it's allowed me to park different trees against this piece for different assemblies and for it to come in tight, basically. And the other thing that I did it on Duloc's facade as well, is I'm actually, when I trim the paper, I'm about 4 inches away from the Luan, and then I'd spray glue and I fold it back around in itself to create like a 2-inch roughly wide gasket here, but that just comes over and mushes, it just pushes in, whether it folds in or out or twists around or whatever. With 2 of them, you end up really knocking out, and the kids can hear that kind of, the shape in there is basically the perfectly correct shape in theory, and then the 2-inch paper gasket takes up the difference, so we haven't got hot lit cyc or projection screen lines separating these set pieces if we can possibly help it. And I've done that all the way around at all 3 points. I've also got a handle inside of each one of them here so they can grab it and go. And it's clear that they have to park it and then bring the trees in to meet it, and that they can't be setting trees and then crashing through and trying to put this in there. So, it's kind of passively teaching them, and I've been talking to them about this and they know that, but the way that it's built is so that it works the right way. So we've got that type of thing going on there. And, over here, same story with the handles that I put on. A place to put your hands, and pretty soon we'll have the bow coming around. I need to sit down at the computer. We'll probably look at that before I get back here on the site tomorrow. I need to draw the bow. I need to draw the keel profile and come down here and make it in plywood and slap it on that block so that it's holding that chin and the nose. And I need to take into account those pieces from Shrek, those ribs that I'm going to use here. And I might even find a place to array them around at certain intervals, at certain angles, that I can make a block at a certain point from that location. Maybe you'll see what I laid out, but lay out a center of this back straight line and then pull from that center to different angle locations, snap, snap, snap my chalk line, and at those places make a simple block with a simple angle on it, the same one on the outermost, and then the next one in, and next one in have the same angle but a mirror image of one another. And then on that block that's there, it could just be trimmed by this shape, and then I can stick to one side of it and screw into it with those rib pieces, and thereby so long as yada yada, those are doing the same sort of thing that the keel shape is doing. And then I can get a block dropping it at an angle here, dropping it at an angle here, and bend over to that keel profile and bend back around again for a chin. And then all of a sudden I've got these rib shapes, and I can go to the chin between the bottom of them and the chin board that's curved itself. This will all make more sense when I'm showing you in the model. Anyway, then if I'm doing it all symmetrically and carefully, I can probably do what I did with Fiona's tower here, which is to measure and make a cardboard piece that goes from here to there, and then a separate piece there to there. I'm not sure yet what exactly or how exactly I might do that. I had hoped to have curving like boards, but what you don't realize is like it's a can of worms to do something like that. But I think I'd be remiss if the front of this ship was just smooth and brown. So I have to start thinking about how I want to give it some dimension in a realistic way. And you kind of want something of some kind of thickness and basically side it, put a bendable board first and then another one. That would be, a potential way to do it. Although they should be gathered more tightly at the front and be spreading out as they go around the corner. It becomes complicated. So I might settle for a two-tone instead of like bare wood where you should see boards. I might settle for an actual painted exterior. So we'll see about that. And we've got to maybe do something with the boat, even though that could be finished. It's that it's hardwood plywood. I got to thinking, wouldn't it be funny because that whole side, it could look like a beautiful wooden boat, but for theater you just paint it a brown tone. I need a little bit of, I come up with a solution with water. There's the fabric we're using for water, maybe a little bit of water around the bottom edge of it, like a little skirt. Same for the bow, same for the two sides. I think a little bit of water on those, sailing along. But that's the type of thing you don't add until like opening night, because it would just be picking up and collecting all this crap that's out here and making a mess and getting caught on things. So once everything's clean and finished and done, I could maybe take a strip of that and twist it and staple it along those places. So, I mean, these are finishing touches that I have kind of coming down the pike. But I guess we'll look at the CAD model and try to get somewhere with a plan for the ship. And then we'll come down here in the morning and get everything painted black. And then maybe we'll chip away at the ship then while there's rehearsal or something. I don't know. I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to go to sleep. I should just make a quick pass in here, which is where our art director and our director and kind of everybody else in the creative team is busy working on props and costumes, tiara for all the different Mer sisters, right? Jellyfish umbrellas. Got some plants going in those urns. And then I guess we could look at the props table too while I'm at it. That's a painting that we're trying to fly in. Obviously not that artwork. Wouldn't be appropriate. I brought this from my place. Student made all these little fake foods. Super impressed with those. All the different dishes that they sing. She looked them up and made each of them specifically Isn't that sweet? Look at these kebabs. I'm always sorry that I'm not as excited as I want to be when they show me that stuff, because I'm just doing 1,000 miles an hour, but I gotta remember to tell her how impressed I am with those. And then this is our Amazon glow ball. I don't know where the remote is, but it's got to be closed, backfilled, and have a squiggle illustrated on it, and put some black down in the opening. It's our magic shell. We've got some other kind of maybe rough and tumble stuff, but what are you going to do? Anyway, a lot of other talented people working hard. We got to have the cart where the crab head, where Sebastian pops her head out of it. Lots to do. All right, now I can go. All right, I'm at a point here with the model where I brought in the model of that baluster, and I've, pushed it into the surface from this view, and I've played with the angle so that if I were to just start and go straight from here, which there is a 90-degree side there, or a straight section for a good ways. If I were to go straight and get down to where I can run a board around for a chin that can't be any longer because this tips toward and away from us and comes closer to the ground, which I can try to represent here as well just to do a check. But more importantly, at the right height and in the right location like this, I think that I can just notch into that plywood all the way around based on an angle pulled from the center like I was talking about last night. Create a notch for these, and then I'll have to show the angle in here of the sidewall of the location in the plywood to the face of this framing, but I don't have to actually model the block, but I can basically create a drawing where I know what block lengths to make with what angle cuts on their ends, and I can knock them out and stick them to the baluster as a sub-assembly. But then taking the baluster and going into the notch in the plywood, the particular block on the side of it should reach over and engage with the front of this set. It can be just zipped in, and I could zip straight down through that plywood to lock it in into a trifecta of structural integrity here, with the plywood trapping the top of the block that it's mounted to sideways and around whatever. And I think all of that will be a really nice, fairly structural attachment. And then I'll go through the holes on the top with PVC. But one of the nice things about it being a straight shot down is that I can just use a 2x4 stick to go down to behind that chin and wrap the chin across them all, plumb them up, and zip them through the chin board in, to hold them. It may have them just be a little bit long so I can cut them all the right length, which will mean I can blow through doing that pretty quickly. And then the cardboard that goes around that is, it's not a complex curve. It's a simple curve below this point where it straightens. From here down is a simple curve around the front of this thing with a flat sheet of cardboard. And then where this begins, what I can do is I can go to the edge of the cardboard that's standing up out here and mathematically or otherwise place the center line of each of these posts all the way around. I can plot onto that cardboard and cut them. And at that point, one of them ought to lay down center to center flat between two of these, and then the adjacent one can lay down, and they basically overlap on those seam edges. And then we'll contend with those seams, that in that way we'll get a substrate that's smooth and representational of the hull, and then we can go from there to maybe make a strip of cardboard that is as wide as those seams are and lay that down, or pieces like over that, but we can basically be additive to get rid of those big vertical seams that we're going to end up having. Sometimes you don't even see stuff like that from the house. But it all starts with where and how to locate this. Get the angle at the back of it right here. Where's my cursor? Get the angle from here to there. And I probably work through to show here where the chin would have to be in space based on how far that this can tip, because I don't want to have to trim all the 2x4s out from hitting this framing if I can help it. But it does push that angle out some. Anyway, get all done here, and I'll come back and show you. I got to draw a keel, so that's going to have to kick forward and be a lot bigger and drop in and come down. But that'll be another nice way to use the 7 sticks that we have. It means I can put a pair at the middle front and still have an even amount to go around both sides. So if I have 2 there, I have 2 more, and then yeah. Yeah, what was I going to do there? Anyway, the point is they can straddle the keel and they can create a place for the that holds that arch on either side of that keel, so our cardboard sheet can start and stop at the keel, and the keel can be the center line of the front, and therefore we haven't got to do any funny business right on the center line. It'll basically take the focus off. Then I'm going to hack that lion's head, slam it on there, and some other stuff like that. I want to get rope involved with the ship somehow, and I want to get, there's a lot of stuff going on with the ship, so let's just take it one step at a time here. Hang on. All right, we're looking at these blocks that I need to bring in. Now, it is important to note that I don't know what this angle is, because that was established in real life just looking at the other pieces that it was coming in to sit next to. So with that being said, I did put a 2x8's width on this rectangle, and I've moved it to basically the thickness of the plywood down from this surface that we're looking at here, which is what's there. There's a rim joist here at the end of this, so that's about 1.5 inches, which is what I put that in there. The idea is coming close to like what length of a stick to make, or will cover this. So if anything, I think the angle's a bit squeezed. It may need to be straightened down a little bit, which means 48 will either do it, or I can shorten it, which is fine. And 48's half of an 8-foot stick. So, I just have an understanding now of what will be required in those blocks, because this is actually the floor. And the wheels are there, and it's just the cab that's turned it, and I didn't bother to unturn it, sorry. So that's the surface, and it looks like about half of the 5-inch, or a little bit greater than half, so 3 inches or something off the floor. Lets me hang that chin board down if I want to, but I probably wouldn't. Anyway, that's a nice amount of clearance, because we have to have some kind of a floating, there's a word for it that I can't think of right now, but like a skirt, but it'll be a rigid piece that sits behind this part of the bow that will come down as a part of this upper construction rigidly and never touch the floor when tipping back and forth. So there's that component. And then behind it, so that the overlap is correct for lighting, because if we were in front of it, the top edge of the lower piece would be highlighted and it would look awful. So behind that, we've got a screen basically that comes down in various slots on the rigid one, and has pegs through those slots from the lower screen, and something on the front of them to keep them from falling back in there, likely just a smooth piece of cardboard or something like that. But anyway, the pegs come down and hang in slots when this thing is level, that keep that lower screen 1 inch or something off the floor. And then when the boat is crashing, it comes down, stops on the floor, and then the pins on it can move through the slots smoothly, which means that everything needs to be pretty sloppy. So everything to disguise that is in that front cover apparatus. And so it'll be a little bit, it'll be hopefully impactful, but also forgivable, that there is some, mechanicals. There are some mechanicals to be seen. And that's where I think I'm going to get away from trying to have board texture or board information, visual information of any kind on the front of this, because those big horizontal seams will be all the more obvious when the two sections of finish are, moving next to one another. So I think solid colors, punchy solid colors done in a way that disguise the fact that that's happening. And like, I've got some brass things. This is the Prince's ship, so I got some touches of metal I want to try and get into it. Gild the handles of the steering wheel, and put that lion's head on there. And I want to get some rope details happening, like I'm saying. But right now I'm just looking at what it's going to take to make sure that the keel in the end, finish this, and it's actually, what am I working on more importantly is the design for the keel to be cut from plywood in a pair. And you can actually see in here I've got the 96 by 48 inch sheet of plywood in that sketch. Let me try to look at that from the side, or from the front according to this, and turn orthographic on. Oh, because it's tipped. Anyway, that's why I wasn't doing that. So we are looking at this from the true side, even though the rest of that thing is tipped down. But I got a 4x8 sheet of plywood in space here, and I need to find a way to make my design happen within that, and preferably even be able to get 2 out of a sheet, which I don't think I'm going to be able to do. It looks like that's annoying. I probably have to throw it on not a full sheet anyway, but I wanted to understand the size of it. So I want it to be something that I can stick a 2x4 to either side of, just as I'm sticking probably a 2x4 to every one of those existing balusters to extend them down and then cutting them off. But it wouldn't hurt to make something that references the underside of the front of the framing here in the floor to like lock this in and establish, you know, its correct location, and then leave something down here to take an angle from to set the rest of those two. Just trying to make life easy for myself and making the piece in real life, being able to work to it to find the rest of what I need here. I mean, this is where I'm putting in all the time and energy so that I can just sort of knock out something that probably looks fairly complicated, and it is, but it's not the type of thing that you want to just come at in the field and just muddle your way through. If you don't want it to take like a week or more, that'll be where you are, or at least me. So let me just keep plugging away here briefly to make sure I get this right. Well, I don't know what I got there before my phone rang and cut off the video, but the point is that I may not use a full sheet to build that keel or those keels profiles, but I know what I need to get. So I gotta at least create a print job of this template and get that out of a large format printer so that I can just throw it on plywood until I find a piece that's large enough. It's pivotal that I get that all out of one shape, or take the time to get it out of two. It's pivotal that I get the template printed out and make this really happen in real life directly from the computer that way, so that everything else is kind of mindless. I've gone to this much work. I was planning originally to like measure around, see I can use this sheet and I can locate the points here. You know, I could plot them out off the edges of the factory sheet, key points, and then just lay those dimensions out on a full sheet, and then just connect. The curves aren't specifically important as long as they hit some of these key. Frankly, I could put all the points on the sketch on a 4x8 sheet in a drawing space and dimension to them based on the edges of the sheet, and literally put them on the sheet in real life and connect the dots and make that part. But it's a longhand, pain in the ass way of doing it, and then I've got to trace it, which I guess I'll do anyway. So I don't know, I'm babbling. I literally hadn't thought that far, but I guess I'll try and print this. If that becomes a headache, I will lay it out the way I was gonna. Maybe that's a cool exercise. Maybe it won't take that long. Back to work. All right, this is super janky because I'm stressed out and don't care to access the right information in my brain, apparently, or even bother to go on a search. But I had to turn the view so that the sheet of plywood is normal to the drawing space, which didn't quite work perfectly. So there's some jumps in the line, and it's a very unprofessional layout here because I'm not being successful in turning the drawing view based on making this line, for example, perfectly horizontal. I can't seem to find that control. Anyway, the point is that the key areas that I need from the outside of the sheet, if I go up the short side, this amount, and the other amount, those are the ends of the two lines for the piece that I'm trying to cut out. I can put the current baluster, one of them, I can lay it on the sheet where the tangent from straight to curve location of it is at this distance from the end, and this overall from the far side, from the long side. In fact, it actually goes to this point, even though there's no line showing right there. So I located the front corner of that piece at this distance from the end and this distance from the side. So if I lay that baluster out on here in that position, then from that spot to here should also be a tangentially straight line, or down to here at least through. I got to put that on there. That's what I need to do, because this is a 4-inch offset that I can make a block and just scribe right down to there. But then that mark, that location where that stops, is ostensibly 90 degrees off the edge of this. But between that point and this point at 3.5 inches off the sheet is where the cutout area stops. So actually, that looks close to there, but I'll bother to put that on like I'm saying, just to be a stickler. It really would never be seen. I actually can't show that where it becomes, see, and this is the amount of tolerance that I've got here because I'm tracing. This is a really janky drawing. So we'll do that part live. But then I got this point and this point and this point and this point, and I can pull some kind of an arc through there, and just the parts that are important that they're accurate and the parts that aren't. Oh, and then the angle from the surface of the plywood that's sticking off the front of the ship, so I can get that to notch in correctly and then screw through the side of this. Again, really janky, but it's going to be the fastest route from discovering the geometry in a safe place where it doesn't matter if I, let me open it. It doesn't matter if I make a false move because I don't waste that much time doing it. And I also don't waste any material, which we know is the benefit of the medium. Yeah, so if I had built it correctly, I could have also grabbed this and tipped it like before and had that keel move with it, but that's not how I built it. I'm just trying to get things done IRL. So hopefully that ends up looking ship-like and not sticking up too much. And then that bowsprit pole, I showed that in the keel IPT. If we look at the sketch, that's what this is. If it's pivoting in that point and it goes straight up at 168 is 14 feet from the floor. So I can just give a quick measure at it's 51 inches at the absolute maximum length because it's going to stick out at this angle at the top of the bow is the point, like that. Really complete the look, but it makes this whole set piece massively wider. So I'll just put a pivot there so it can flip up and around and just sit against the bow basically before this thing goes off stage. And the pivot will be there. Anyway, the section of tube that I would get without even having to go up there and measure when the time comes, I know about 50-inch long, because not only is that not all the way down and past the pivot point, it's already 1.5 inches shorter than what the actual to 14 will be. So if I get a 50-inch long piece of tube, the right diameter, slice it, taper it with zip ties along what would be the top, because the audience will never see that, and put it in position with a simple pivot here, then it can be flipped up, like I said, by crew. I may have to do something so they don't have to run up onto the set to do it, but because the deck is here, and that's going to be above what they can reach, so I have to maybe do something that'll help them do it from the floor. But I really think it's an important part of the set. So now that I got that, I'll print this drawing out to take with me, and then we'll go down there and try to make something happen. Yeah, don't mind me, I'm just out here, great stuff, foaming my fucking pampas grass. You really got to come at this land, sea, and air, I'm finding. It's a good method. Once there's foam between any of this stuff, it's so dry and covered with, actually they're painful. They're cutting me little hairs like corn. Is a defense, but all that surface area and all those little hairs have got such a great bond, and this urethane is so tenaciously sticky. I'm definitely getting the core pumped full, and then now the other thing I consider doing is just buying liquid expanding foam components from like Smooth On or somebody, and just putting a simple collar around the base of the plant with like sheet metal or plastic or something, even cardboard, just around it, throwing them in there, and a quick rising foam. I could put a little black tint into it. I don't know if they're selling it black already yet. I could have done it that way, but I didn't want to try and order materials. This time of year is always tricky. If it gets real cold or something, they get ruined or whatever else. And this stuff was right on the shelf at Ace Franchises, have the Pond and Stone, around me anyway. So I went this way. Anyway, I'm gonna need both hands here to finish about 1 can per plant. And the thing about them is not only are the tall seed pods so remarkable, but all the little fluff coming off the bottom is another thing that I don't want to lose. A good amount of it came off the other one, my prototype. In fact, it's laying over here on the floor, on the ground. So I'm trying to get around the outside of the actual vertical portion of it before it bends over and touches the ground, as a part of what I'm doing with the foam here. So hopefully it comes away with it. But like I said, I need 2 hands. Let's see if I can make this happen. Look at all this stuff. This texture is cool, but you got to come at it from every single angle. And then when it's wet, at least my brain has a hard time differentiating between the little glossy hot spots and places that I've actually missed. And I'm actually, like, I've loaded it up with paint, shooting, thinking it's white foam, and it ends up being gloss. So, you know, I'm trying to balance letting things dry and then come back and look at it. As soon as nothing's shiny anymore, you know, it's really easy to pick out where you missed a little bit. But by and large, everything is covered that needs to be covered, or could be covered right now, I should say. There are other things that need to be blacked out, but you know, that spray gun, man, if you're not using one of those, I gotta tell you, you're making a big mistake. It's perfect for stuff this size. I might have been able to run an even larger paint sprayer, but honestly, being remote here where this isn't my shop, that battery gun is just dope. So that tattered Luan gone, blacked out. All this other stuff blacked out. And the nice thing is that it fortifies this paper. It's a combination. The paper isn't any old paper. It's this, you know, school institutions supplier paper. And I need to get the actual info, because you can't just go get painter's paper from the store. Not to mention they change that stuff out all the time. Whoever's making paper all around the world and rolling it up and selling it at the lowest price is what you're going to find ever more these days, because most people just look, it's just paper, just butcher paper or painter's paper or whatever. It's constantly changing. There's a particular quality to this paper that I really like, and I'm going to get that info, and it's going to make a big difference when you're trying to do these techniques. It needs to be flexible enough and tough enough, but you know, it needs to be able to hand tear if you need it to, and just everything about it, the way that it soaks up the paint and then becomes more plastic and more, you know, resilient. Just really nice stuff. The black is just Valspar 2000. You could probably even go cheaper, but I spray new paint because I'm spraying and I don't need big boogers and globs in it. So yeah, I did all the B sides first, and then I flip it over to sit on those if I can't wait for things to dry. And I don't mind if it gets a little bit wonky on the B side. The A side is what I spray and leave up, usually. And it's time to go take a little break overnight, come back. They got a performance to do during the school day for the middle school students for like a piece of the show, 45 minutes worth or something, I don't know. Anyway, the stage is tied up until middle of the afternoon tomorrow, and then I can hit it pretty hard. I got to get the ship bow hull created, and I just got to have it on the stage, nothing in my way, and, you know, workbench, construction tools, woodworking tools, and nobody trying to rush me or get me off stage soon or fix something or anything else. And I can't be sweating whether or not things like this that are a little bit more avant-garde, that, you know, like the balloons and the whole facade to Ursula. It's a cool idea, and it's the culmination of a variety of different things that I've done before, but all together at once, not really. So I really wanted the peace of mind of that being to this point. I know I can dry brush now, you know, and I know that if I've got this infrastructure to reattach stuff that's just going to screw together and be there, then I'm pretty comfortable with that. Then I can start getting my head clear and finish up a project like getting the boat to look and to work correctly and to be efficient about it and not just spin my wheels and things like that, you know, that I have to be in the right headspace. But I've also got to make sure that if we run into a problem with some of what I have planned to do with this stuff, that I can do something with it. It's no use having the boat done and having, you know, 1 day left to completely create one of the sides of this turntable, or more than one or whatever. So I know what I'm doing. It's a method to my madness. The rock needs to get covered up, but that's going to be fairly straightforward as well, and it works for rehearsal purposes right now. I got the rest of those grasses cured up all day in the sun with the foam that I injected in around the base of them. We got to make some more bases. This looks terrible up close, but honestly, when you fill it with light and back up 20 or 30 feet, it looks just fine. But I think it still needs like a panel detail or something on the door. And, the boat needs a little love. The rowboat, the ship, I should say. Rowboat, ship. The ship's what I got to really hit on, hammer down, and do. And then the rowboat also needs a little something. So anyway, trying not to babble. Back again tomorrow. So I'm looking at how to place those balusters quickly. Both how to literally get it done accurately, and also how to choose where to place them. Simultaneous kind of basically design. This is where the magic happens. I know that I have 7 that I can use. I know that if we're looking down on the deck of the ship, I know that the center's a keel, so that doesn't count. So I have 7. I could put 3 on either side, and I'd have a spare, and that would be fine. But if I put 3 on either side, I actually haven't got anything at the end position to maintain the curve. I just have 3 points in the middle. However, I'm going to be going and sliding them down, and it's going to be becoming... The curve is going to be far less relevant at the edges because I want the bow to have a point that's higher than the sides, and the sides are also going to be blending into the stair pieces there. So what am I saying? That could just be a 2x4 most likely. We could be going from curved to straight there. So I don't mind taking the opportunity to divide the curve I'm trying to do into 4 facets rather than 3 facets, either because I'm taking a fundamentally rigid material, corrugated cardboard, and I am going to try and use the corrugations to my advantage, but I want a real easy time of skinning this thing. And that led me to thinking that maybe I would make all these 4 intervals equal for some reason. However, this isn't a part of a circle. This is a Bezier curve, so this is a tighter radius here than here, and there's a kind of a point, even though very soft, right there in the geometry. So things like a division equally here, where that works with a globe, in a lot of the divisions that you see to create a sphere, any kind of faceting of a sphere, it's going to be completely symmetrical and equal divisions. So that's where my head was here, but I guess the fundamental problem is that it's not really a piece of a circle. It's a more complicated curve than that. So what I was going to get at was how did I figure that? Well, I made 3 points based on what looked like. I'm also looking at whether just equal angles is the way to do it, because that's going to lay out differently in terms of distance between points. But to start with, I'm just going to do it the first way. And how did I figure to get it done? Well, I just measured directly between each one with an aligned dimension, added them together, and divided that by 4. So I have 4 even amounts. So I'll raise these dimensions, and I'll force, 28.367 into all 3 and see if the 4th one comes out at 28.367, and then have a look at what that looks like too. It may just look stupid. And then I could make equal angles here, which may look more relevant to what I'm trying to do. Anyway, this is the type of stuff that, like, when I decide any number of things like this, in the end, it makes complete sense. And even for me, sometimes it's added to my understanding of something, and then I don't even think about it the next time, and it just goes right on by, and I don't realize basically how much you actually have to look at. And that's why I value CAD so much, because I can't be looking from above like this and holding anything on the edge like that to understand it. I mean, being able to do this in the computer prior to real life is a real serious tool to have available to you. And that and those paint sprayers, man, that stuff's probably all dry. I'm going to keep plugging away here, make some kind of a decision, but we got to get the front of this ship together. Well, this was fairly straightforward. I just placed one of these existing bad boys in the location here and up here, and got those couple locations down there, and we're 4 inches off here. So actually this foam was, it's uncommon to have something 4 inches wide as far as materials laying around. Most stuff is like 2x4 is 3.5, but this was truly 4 from last year trimming the windows for Crunch'em Hall. So if I just put my pen where I'm tight to it there and scribed along, that got me that. We had that circle, which was close enough to whatever I had in there. Paint can up there, that point, and I've got them aligned 2 sheets. 1/2 inch will be fine. The straightness of the sheet isn't important because I'm going to use a 2x6 or a 6x6 in between the 2 of these, and that will control for straightness. I needed a thick enough edge to staple to fill the front of the keel surface with ram board, and so 1/2 inch will do us fine. 1/2 inch sheathing right now is 22 a sheet, so it's not too bad here. There'll be other, quite a lot other areas of material for use in something else. I chewed up a lot of stuff that was left over negative from last year's parts, and used so much existing stuff like I said this year I don't feel that bad about. We had 2 new sheets here and 2 new sheets for the top of that set piece, and that was it. So let's cut these out and slap them up. Oh, I gotta get the notch in there. Whose cheese is it? Gotta get the notch in here for the deck, so that will register everything. And then the other ones we're going to dial based on, once I have this in, then we're going to put something flexible from the top point somewhere and curve around and down to the side piece. And then once I lay out all the notches in the floor based on this, 1, 2, 3, and the same on the other side, then I can set these into those notches and maintain the angle that I'll know at that time for in and out, anyway, tipping forward and back, and then basically rise up in the notch to meet that curving pointed hull shape. And wherever I stop at, whatever's holding that line for me, will be where I pin it in, and then I'll show you when we get there. Well, I think it's starting to look the part. That PVC board is necessary to do that bend, but then you get probably an equal, because it's the forces of constraining it in this location have got it doing an arc from the point where it's screwed there to the point where it's screwed there. So unlike the curve that's on here, which changes at this point, basically, this doesn't change there. And so you got this like rolling back out toward us before it goes around. And so I would like to see it do a true taper in and around here, and that's actually pushing the keel left. So what that's going to mean is that at these intervals, we'll move it left or right a little bit so that we have at least, I don't want a concavity here to either side of the keel. I want it to tip away. That's also why I divided it with a nice big heavy keel, because not only does that look cool and realistic, it's going to keep the planes of the front from being flat. And you're going to imagine that they go back at a relatively sheer angle, because that's what ships do. And this interrupts from all these angles the ability to see down one plane and into the other plane. And so the lighting will also be pretty different on either one of them. And so all together, it should give the illusion of a more pointed front. But I don't love that this bends out like this. I want to tip that in, and that'll be what we do with these other controls. This took some finagling. I decided to go vertical, which is what this face does, to this point, and then it tips under. So I pulled the vertical down. I use a 2x8 here, not only for the real estate, because once we taper up here, we only got a couple inches left, and but also for the strength. And then I wanted some meat down here. I didn't really like not having a face to pull that into, and I didn't cut a lot away from this. I could cut even more away from this to kind of dial this all in, this big block. And so I liked that, and I copied it on the other side. And so I made sure that my clearances are working as well. I have it pinned now. So anyway, it swings clear of everything. I want the plane to play off larger than this all the way around, so that as we swing back and forth, it doesn't just stop here. It'll pass a little bit. But also, I don't want to see any of that. I don't want to see in there from the house when we're looking at this side of the ship, which we won't. It'll be well around the corner. So I really think this thing is starting to take shape, and that's cool. And an inner railing system, I've got some ideas, but I'm not sure what I want to do yet. We've got to cover the interior here, and that's got to be able to pivot as well. So we've got that scenario to handle. I've got some like set dress up stuff that I could do to disguise some of those areas, some prop things that I could bring in. Got the rock to do. I'm going to put some of the grass over here, I think, if the director likes that, because it adds visual interest here. Makes it clear that we're practically in the water, but we're also maybe near enough to land. So when they do the, when she washes up on shore with her legs and stuff, when Ariel does, it makes sense that she's not just on a rock in the middle of the ocean. This has also got a land component. And then we've got more of those for Kiss the Girl at different intervals here with the rowboat. And so when they finally come out, I think the cohesive nature of adding a bunch more of those and then taking them away from that just one scene is some subtlety that, I like. So we'll see. And if that flies. All the stuff I painted black is still hanging out. I wasn't able to turn some of this stuff over, and so we've got areas like that. But it looks like foam with a bad paint job. I think that it'll look okay. All that stuff will stand out, I think, in the lights. We're using a lot of colored lights this year. And so my paint job is probably going to be pretty punchy and contrasty, just dry brushing. And so that's where we are with this. These set pieces have been installed. Everything got blacked out. The fabric's going to catch whatever colors it catches in the lighting. It's off-white. It's maybe supposed to be a sail fabric or whatever. And then all this dry brush I can do, and I can it'll end up naturally staying away from back inside there where it'll stay perfectly black. And we're just going to catch and pull dimension up and around. So believe it or not, that's some paper, and it's pretty flat. But the idea is going to be that by pulling the highlights out in these areas, it looks, far more curved and interesting. And I think we'll end up getting that. And we've got those battery lights that we're putting one in there to underlight up in here. We're putting one in Ursula, which is coming down the pike. I got some cool ideas for that. And so Triton, his throne room, I had some more sail fabric. I hung it over in that low area. I let it fall in and around this kind of a shell thing. And so, I think overall this seems like it's missing something, but it may not be the end of the world. Maybe we just need like a cushion or something like that. We'll see what we end up doing there. And so, things are kind of coming together. I got all day tomorrow till early afternoon before they need to run the show, which is Wednesday. And then I can do a little work afterward. And then Thursday all day is black, no rehearsal. So I can work all day Thursday. And also Friday morning to do a few things. So the ship needs a lot of work. The turntable needs some stuff. The grasses need to be sorted out. I need to make some bases like we've been using for the one. It's just a stick on a circle of plywood with a handle on it. But I kind of want that inside the grass. And you gotta be careful because these grew up and away from my place, so they didn't grow perfectly at 90 degrees from the ground necessarily. They weren't necessarily cut off at 90 degrees from the ground. The bottom of them isn't necessarily perfectly flat. That I think I would like to try putting a collar around and pouring a liquid foam two-part components into the center, letting it flow out and around to the collar and then rise up in everywhere. Coming right out of the can with the foam was a cool idea, but you wouldn't believe how dense these are, and so you end up with a lot of areas that didn't get foamed together. So we're going to have more of a project of getting this done than I had hoped for. But I think they'll be worth it in the end. The rowboat needs some work. The only problem with these aluminum pans and the caster wheel is that these trees and things like that, they work great for all different types of things that don't have a lot of weight or human performers. As soon as you put somebody in there, we had the same problem on the turntable. It pushes the footprint of these up into the pot. And so I've got those steel circles like we put in the turntable ones. That's a nice solution if you're going to have some weight. And once you draw them, you can get as many made as you want. All this stuff is an investment in your infrastructure. So those have got to be popped in place. But I really like that system for a lot of different things here. And, for example, the alternative is that tub that I haven't done almost anything with. I don't think it's as strong as it could be for not being on a black truck and for not having nearly 3 inches of exposed gappage and wheels under there, which I would have much rather a clawfoot tub. I'm in the market for a damaged acrylic clawfoot tub because they're normally $1,500 or more. But a damaged one, a scratch and dent, one that really could never be installed because it's lightweight and it would work perfectly on stage, and we could put it on some casters that you couldn't even see by the time I was done doing it, and we would have a rolling clawfoot tub that would make more sense for this show, or for shows like these, but we don't have anything like that right now, so I'm on a search. All right, let's look at Ursula. Well, I was on my way home last night, and I had a brainwave because I want to cut big, kind of squat, oval openings into each of these spheres and have all of the bottles of souls standing in there, like a big organic apothecary cupboard. And then these will have small holes in them. And so the whole thing is supposed to look like a big grove of like barnacle or like pustule, globule, whatever, gross underwater things, because Ursula is a gross underwater thing. And what was I going to say? Oh, the bottles. So we've got all the, mostly bamboo, but they got that great pirate bottle shape. They got this gold X on them. They're not a real well-known one. They've got a nice cork in every one of them, and the gold X I think is going to stand. And then for variety, we've got some Patron, which people know. We've got like whatever this is, and I've got a whole bunch of them in here. Variety. And then we got fluorescent sprays that I think that are fluorescent acrylic sprays, and I want to basically just point the spray in here. Try to find a way, maybe put a tube and stick a 2 or 3 inch tube down in there and then fire it and just kind of blast the bottom and get it to mist up. I'll try to get something that looks cool. And the idea being it looks like a soul, various souls. We got this is another like squat looking one. Anyway, so I want those in all those openings, but how do I take and do that quickly? I mean, these are all essentially under tension. Those strips and stuff are under tension. I was hoping the foam would hold it tightly, but you know, then I thought I'd cut a piece of plywood and sit it on the framing in there and bring it over to the opening that I cut and then stack those on there and try to make them stand up in there. And I think the whole thing becomes problematic. But then I had this idea, right? Because we got all this sonotube, especially this damaged sonotube in the basement. And that came with the big stuff that I got for the trees that was nice and straight and full length. Those were Facebook Marketplace sales. And for example, I got this piece of a 30 that's squished with this wrinkle in it like that. Oblong. Same with this 16 has got this shape going on. And there's a 16 here that's got a pretty good stretch of flat inside. So I think that I could cut like, let's say 12-inch slices, and you know, like 2 of each to start with, and then bring them up and move them around on the face of that thing until the position is right, and then trace them, and then jigsaw that out and hope that we don't have, I'm gonna have to do this gently, but hope that the form will hold, even if it just barely holds, but gently jigsaw that out. And then slide that in to where, I don't know, an inch minimum is sticking out. And obviously as it curves away from us, it gets larger and then comes back around. But slide into there's about an inch showing. And then black Great Stuff foam all around that inner corner between the sonotube and the face of this thing. And actually around on the inside too. I guess I could use white if I wanted, because you'll never see it if I'm trying to keep the black going. But let that set up. And then I've got kind of a fortified opening where most of the surface of the sonotube, and I try to get it at 90 degrees, but there's a 12-inch deep shelf going back in there, and have the opening big enough to stand half a dozen bottles in it, right? And then I started thinking, well, you could put some black Great Stuff on the shelf and set these in it and let it just bubble and rise up to glue them down. But then I also thought I could hole saw through that sonotube, and I'd come up with a hole saw hole, because again, most of these are this bottle. Come up with a hole saw hole that stops maybe the shoulder, like right here where my ring finger is, or a little bit higher up. Anyway, just that way you could get them all the colors with soles in them, get all the shelves and get everything blacked out, all the openings and stuff like that. And where you can't use an opening for a different bottle, you can't use an opening. But basically be able to mix and match, shift them all around, and tip them out and over a little bit. Not try to get them to stand there and hold them there, tape them there or anything. They'll all sit down in those little openings, and they can be just art directed a little bit and just tipped around. So they've got a nice like splay and some in the back. And then if I want to, I could put a little dab of foam here, a little dab of foam there, just to kind of tack them, or hot glue, or any other number of things. But if I use the black foam and I black spray the sonotube, I could even put black paper on the back of it if I don't want any backlight from inside the set piece to leak into those openings, and I just want front light. Or if I'm rocking the backlight and we like that, I can, after I've set the bottles, I can cut basically the rest of the entire sonotube away, working from inside, so that all the backlight can get to them, and maybe those openings backlit with UV kind of tone light will have the fluorescent bottles glowing like from inside. Anyway, that's my idea, and it's to be quick and efficient and cost effective, and really easy to make a cut that fits a thing that goes right in it, that we glue up, and it goes right back to holding this thing together. And I think this whole thing is going to be pretty strong if that works by the time that we're done. And I might do that as a test while I have 360 degrees of support to an opening, where opening this larger in the middle, I'm really in for a penny, in for a pound there. If something goes wrong, I have a real problem on my hands. And so I would rather get cut 2 or 3 quarters of the way around a hole like this and have it kind of pushing out and breaking, and have to come up with a solution to that and be able to fix it and lose the texture of the repair, So anyway, trying to be smart, trying to move quickly, trying to be cost effective. That's my plan for those kind of things going on. Lots to do yet, but for now I got to go get a little rest and then back tomorrow. Well, I had been thinking that I had 3 to use to either side of the keel and an extra. However, it became necessary to use at least one on either side of this for right now, because that's where it came from in the design of the keel, and it's got that opening that's holding the one end of this rod that I'm using to indicate, the top edge of everything here, up here. So I threaded this one over it, if you saw that, and I brought it over here, and I'm playing around with up and down in this aspect on this block, and how it will play out if I'm lowering these as I go, because I got to get to a lower elevation over there. And once I go up and down, then I've got tipping in and out, and that influences where this becomes straight and where it takes off and goes down to a loop that ostensibly fits around the base of this thing, which is where we have to begin here, I think. This is why I started there. But to get this ability to test all these things, I had to luckily put the framing layout in chalk. These faces were in chalk on this from when I made the arc here. So I think that, anyway, I pulled the angle off of this, even though I had it in CAD, and it was 9 degrees that I sliced off the end of this block. However, this 5/8 ply was more cost effective than 3/4, but far less rigid and flat. So it was going downhill just in this little bit. So I had to cut the block shorter than the overall distance here, because it was going downhill when the block goes in and stops against the bottom. There's a gap at the top. And so that still had to work out, flush out here in the end. And then I had to get under it with shims and I had to put a pencil line here, check for squareness in this regard, from here to here, this be 90 degrees, go up and down and in and out at the bottom with shims to get this to be 90 degrees. Also, that when I register this thing on this block, we're truly theoretically going up plumb and where we want to be, so that we've only got a couple degrees of freedom here, and basically where we pivot around a point. And it matters where the point is. Is it here? Is it there? That all matters. So at this point, I'm coming and going from the face here. In fact, I'm a little proud right to start with as a product of not knowing how deep to cut these notches, because they'll change as this changes. So I overcut the notch. I overcut this notch to use this one here for now, and I can trace it later if I need to, because I'm gonna need something to return the cardboard here. But I hate to consume one of these because there's a lot of utility in it when it's thicker. So, and also I laid out the notches for 3 on either side, so I'm gonna need it. So we'll have to put some blocks, at least here, middle, top, to catch that. I traced it while it was there with the pencil so I can reuse it, but so at this point I got to go out in the house and see the up down as far as it influences this upper line, and then I got to go up there and see the in and out tip, because we got to get back to plumb here, because as soon as we go around the corner here, we're straightening out so that we can line up with a plumb surface there, which is what I did with this 2x4, not only saving myself one of those posts out here in the middle, but because we're going to straight up and down. So to some degree here, we're right above that with this, and then it starts to tip in, because that's where it is relevant to the front of this floor plan up here. That point is in from here. So we're going from straight and we're curling up and over, and it's a mathematically complicated thing, but what I'm doing is counting on everything to stay where I put it in the right order, and eventually we'll get down to what it is that I want from it. And we have way more foot room or places to walk up here than we used to have, because we had that straight handrail here. But you can see it's over the floor plan, and then it kind of crosses in the floor plan, sort of almost leaves it where it's practically vertical here, if you understand. So let's go out in the house and see. I think we're onto something. I think it's gonna look right. Yeah, there's nothing you could do. It's extremely blunt nose to keep it thin enough to go in and out. And sometimes you don't realize that these other shapes will betray that. I don't think they're overly betraying it. I can see it still, but I think the average viewer is going to be hopefully impressed by this. So let's keep. So I think this is going to go together now for the most part pretty smoothly, that I've figured out most of the issues that I had. I must have just left that there. I had to get things finished up so they could do their last rehearsal today. It's coming up on 11:30. And the bowsprit I was able to put up with a hinge so it can be flipped back so this thing isn't any wider, and flipped back down once we're out. So that's cool. It's obviously got to be better looking than that. And I was so friggin' lucky to get these two flat panel TV boxes, double corrugation in the same direction so it doesn't fight me trying to bend with the corrugation going this way. The two big sides of the one box went up symmetrically. I could copy the dimensions basically. And then I've got the two big sides of the second box, and I have to decide where I want to use those. I think in this position, upper and either side of the actual front. So some smaller pieces on the bottom here, and some smaller pieces in the outer corners there. And then I put those down last, because again, the corrugation's here going this way to do a nice curve that way. But if I do long ways, it'll do a nice curve down the front, and in one piece. And if I add these first and the sides first and then I put those on, then the edges of these front pieces are going down and back, and everything will play out probably pretty smooth. I gotta have some ram board down the keel. I gotta come up with something to float that situation there. I've got to make a bowsprit. I got to doctor up the steering wheel post. I trim those wedges down, just, you know, for kicks. Over here where Eric is thrown off the shipwreck, through this area, I want the cardboard to be cut like boards and to hinge toward us and open as he comes out. So I want a pretty substantial piece of cardboard there too, the double corrugation. I mean, this is almost plastic. It's such nice material. It's a super nice find, or get for us to just stumble across there. So yeah, that's happening. And then I've got the other side to do, a little bit in the middle, some extra glue on there. I got to cover in some of those transitions and the outside seam. And then I want to color on the outside of this thing. I think the color would be here and on top of this. And the stairs are for sure brown around on the other side there, but I don't know if the inside surface is brown. I don't know. I haven't decided what I want to do with that yet. And I might trim this with that foam insulation. That makes a nice just shadow line and outer trim situation. Ursula's lair has been lurking on this conversation. That worked out like I was talking about having that idea. It seemed okay so far. A couple of things. I don't know what it is about that foam. Gravity will pull it down. That's doing up there, on the tops of all these is what I was planning to have for texture. And then I was going to cut the tube back and decide, if I'm going to put those tentacles on there, we'll go around all of that again and go right around the front edge of it, and try to make that kind of look around and inside. But I got to remember that if gravity isn't holding it, it just starts falling away. I mean, these beads, the weight of that foam against the stickiness of it, it's incredibly sticky, but it still wants to fall down. So it's so nice if you could have laid this down on its back, you'd be in far better shape because it would just sit there and do what you wanted. But I can't do that. So I'm going to have to come up with other solutions. I also got inside and went around the back where I could reach. And the more those slats and stuff I broke out of the way, the more everything just stayed put, which was heartening. I think in these openings, everything's basically stayed put. The last couple cans of texture, I think the only other place that I want to use that texture is around that rock a little bit to break it up, just the tiniest little tss, and I'm done. And I have two can kits of it unopened. Yeah, that's all I want, I guess. I mean, maybe the bow of the ship should have some barnacle texture. But that would go up before I painted it, and then it would get dry brushed to make it pop. Maybe that's worth doing. It's such a big, smooth thing. I think along the bottom it needs some staining and some barnacle texture and whatever I put in those pieces there. So I can always go get a kit. But what I'm getting at is I think I want to spray the interior here, especially around the door opening and in these areas, because even though I got in there with the foam and did the same thing on the back, there's really just a couple of slats, half a dozen slats that come in dead end into that tube now that I cut the things out of the way, and the rest of it is basically just paper. And so I think that if I were to just take that coating system and go around each of those areas, it would give the other side as much three-dimensional control as this has, because I've got the weight of those tubes in there, which is not nothing. This one turned out to be too big, and in fact the 2-foot diameter one I cut and passed it a little bit to make it a better size there. Then I've got 14-inch and 16-inch, 2 14s, 3 16s, and the 24 made into like an 18 or a 20. So I can't get in the room. It got locked up before I realized it. I'm going to get 10 or a 12 and do one up there and maybe a couple more in here. I'd like for it to be busier by a little bit. But the weight of those tubes is relatively significant, and the glass is going to be really significant. And then this thing is jostling around and everything else. So there's probably some more infrastructure besides just foam that I can build in there tomorrow to support those before I go and put the glass in there. So I got to sleep and then think. And then so often an inspiration strikes. I've got to cope the ends of the set to fit these trees better. I think the bottom 2/3 fit. It's the top. I just got to notch it and set these in. They should land and come in a lot tighter, hopefully. And then I've got those smaller. The balloons I want to build in and around this, as well as put a couple on the other columns that make up this set, and possibly on the box that disguises the fog machine. But I've also got the circles that came out of these holes. I've already got texture on them. Hate to waste that. Those are nice, kind of cupped, textured, super flat things that I might stick, I guess, on this side of these two columns. Maybe that's what I need for, like, I had different corals planned for all these different places to, you know, different things grow in different areas. Obviously creepy things grow here. So anyway, I've got that stuff to think about. And right now is the worst time to add something that sticks out enough to get caught and broken on curtains, because no one's really accounted for it sticking out right along, especially if it's made of foam, especially if it's white foam, and if it gets broken, it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. So maybe the flatter things, you know, they always look great from the house anyway. I like to make things with real dimension because it does all the great things that things with real dimension do. Throw shadows, you know, curves and highlights all occur because there's dimension. I don't want to sit and illustrate something like this. You could do that on, you know, a big sheet of Luan, and you could do highlight and shadow, and you could illustrate. It's a different approach completely. So I like playing with materials and processes. I have these ideas, and, you know, this is monumentally costly, even though it's ultra cheap. This is thousands of dollars worth of stuff that we've used on this show, and I just can't play around like that in any other kind of situation. So anyway, everybody benefits. Ooh, that turd of foam fell in there. Hopefully this sets up and there's like really good structural integrity tomorrow, and we're going to hit it hard. Chris is going to give us a hand because tomorrow's our last day. Tomorrow is black. There's no rehearsal, so as soon as I get here I can work as late as I want. We'll probably do 12 hours at least. After a while it starts to, you know, become unproductive. Even though you're here, you're not getting anywhere. And I got little repairs that are annoying. Like I chose to crown staple some Luan wings on this so they fit between columns this year instead of drywall screwing. I obviously should have drywall screwed because it couldn't take that. The door is just a flat nothing, which is too bad. We need a little transom window thingy majiggy. All the paper that's lifting on these, I mean, they've been great. Basically what's happened is areas that we didn't realize were never glued have been played up and played up and played up now for a couple of years. So honestly, just getting those areas glued down, these ought to have as much, you know, structural integrity as by and large the most of the areas of it do have. So all the grass has got to happen. And I've been thinking about, before I use the 14-inch sound tubes in that application, I was going to cut like a 1-foot slice and just put it on a circle of plywood, or put a circle of plywood in the bottom of it that fits it and screw it in, and then basically just squirt foam all around the inside of it, the bottom and the sides, and then just push what I've got for pieces of foamed together grass into it until it's basically full, and build for like that, rather than trying to gather that around a 2x4 on a flat piece of plywood. It's going to be tough. If they were potted in those tubes, then I could just black the tubes out, or we could just spray glue a bunch of the grass around the bottom of the tubes to disguise them, get them all to work together. Anyway, trying to get them to stand vertically is going to be another issue. So what I thought I might do is find a place to put a different sonotube, just slice it, a small one, and stick it up somewhere on the wall or something, and be able to pull it open and put the upper parts of the grasses into it, and then take our work and put it directly underneath where we're foaming and leaving it to cure up, so that it's basically held perfectly vertical and upright, and we can see that it'll look good while it's curing up. And then, because doing anything laying down or standing them up, they'll tip over in the middle of what you're trying to do. So tomorrow's a day where we can maybe set some of those things up. It's going to be important to get things kicked off early that need to cure. I have more of this to do tomorrow, and then that needs to cure. All the things I talked about with this, I better get right to it and get the foam applied to it and let that start curing again, because I just need to keep it curing. I can't be leaving it to sit around not doing its thing. So tonight was the first time I had the cojones to start into that. I wanted to get the ship sorted to a certain extent. There's only so much time in the day. Better go rest and come back at this tomorrow, but it's getting close.